Good morning, all, and welcome. Happy to see you all. My name is Ren Durayo. I am your host for today. We'll wait 5 minutes as other people are entering, but while we're waiting, if you wouldn't mind letting us know who you are in chat. Tell us your name, where you're located, and your connection to the topic. Oh, my friend Iqbal is here. Good to see you, Iqbal. Welcome, Mandy. Ooh, all my friends are here. It's very exciting. Mandy is being very humble. She does work in after school, serving elementary school students, but she is the director of all the programs that she's working with. Ooh, Philadelphia in the house. Welcome, Philadelphia. All right, good people. Very happy to have you all here. We are here to hear about managing challenging behavior in the after school. And we all know that since young people have returned to school and after school since the COVID shutdown, a major concern of educators and youth workers has been challenging behavior from young people. So we will focus on how to support young people who are struggling, how you can support yourself when you're triggered by challenging behavior from certain young people or even parents. And then we'll get to hear from a panel. Today, we get to hear from Sheri Glucoft Wong, who is a family therapist in the Bay Area, also a school consultant and author of the book, Raising Kids, Your Essential Guide to Everyday Parenting. I'm going to invite Sheri to give a little bit more of her own bio when she speaks. We'll then get to hear from Sheri Gillis. Director of Expanded Learning, ISANA Academies in Los Angeles, California. Good morning, Shiba. And Ludecea Nunis, mental health clinician and consultant at the YMCA Urban Services Bureau in San Francisco, California. Welcome, Ludecea. I'll turn it over to Sheri, but I would also like to say, please continue to communicate with the rest of the attendees in the webinar chat. And if you have a specific question for Sheri or the panelists, or just a question in general about managing challenging behavior, you can post it in the question and answer box. It says Q&A on your Zoom toolbar. Sheri has asked that if you are asking a question about certain behavior from a certain young person, that you please include the age of the young person that you would like some information about. I think that's it. Oh, we will send out this recording and also the slide deck and any other resources when we end this webinar. Sheri, will you take it away for us?
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be here with you all today. And I want to start off by thanking you so much for the good work you do with kids and families. You're just essential. And today I am going to talk about supporting kids, but also supporting yourself as you support kids. And what I want to be focusing on is your understanding of kids' behavior and supporting a skill set around their challenging behavior. So everything I talk about today is going to be about tools, perspectives and tools that are actually usable on the ground, literally, playground, classroom with kids. So I am a family therapist. I work with kids. I only work with kids in the context of their parents. And I began to do that because I found early on in my career that I could make a great relationship with kids and then that was over and then what? But parents are forever. And the feeling between parents and kids and their interactions are forever. So I've always focused on that. And in that vein, I've done a lot of parenting groups and parent education at schools for many decades. And I've also done training and work with teachers, after-school staff, and leaders with just playground supervisors, crossing guards, school bus drivers, children's librarians, pediatricians, family lawyers, everybody that works in one way or another with kids and families. And I have to say that it's the kids and parents that have been my true mentors about and educators about how to best support kids. So the tools I'm going to share today come from people like you around what works and what doesn't work. I want to say one thing about COVID, which is during the time when COVID had the biggest impact, the pandemic had the biggest impact, things really got out of whack. They got out of whack at schools, they got out of whack for families, they got out of whack for parents in their own lives. And then as the pandemic began to ease, it got out of whack in the other direction, people making up for it, people trying to catch up from it. And so now we have a lot of out of whack trying to fix out of whack. And I just want to remind you that what we really want to do here is get in whack, not make up for being out of whack. So let me start by saying all professions and endeavors have tools of their trade. In the work that you do and all human service work, the tool of the trade is you. So what you need to do to keep that tool sharpened and working well is to be sure to take care of yourself, body, mind, spirit, and to also face, like with all tools, what you can do and what you can't do. And I'm here today to tell you that whether you can see it or not, whether it registers on the spot or even in your time knowing a kid or not, you have tremendous influence in the lives of kids and in shaping their sense of themselves, their self-esteem, who they are socially. And I want to acknowledge that influence. I, at the same time, want to let you know that you have limitations, that there's just so much you can do. There are whole areas of kids' lives that you can't do anything about. And being able to accept your limitations and optimize your influence is the balance that we're looking for. And to also know that what you do goes a long way to help kids manage the things you can't affect for now. But at some point, they have more agency in their own lives, and they have taken in what's happened in their time with you. So just to let you know that. So today I'm going to talk about perspectives, and I'm also going to talk about tools. The perspectives are kind of a macro, how you think about kids, how you think about behavior, how you think about managing individuals and groups of kids. And then the specifics, the how-to, what to exactly do. Those are the tools, those are the macros. So let me start with this part about your influence. I just want to emphasize that over the years, and honestly, I've seen so many kids and families and worked with so many schools, I have learned that things that happen where teachers and after-school leaders feel ineffective show up later. So that somebody says, you know, I heard this from somebody that worked for my kids in an after-school program. I heard this from a teacher when they were younger. And now that I'm seeing it, it's all coming into view. The parents, it really has an impact on prompting them to get help or taking in something they were unwilling to see. So never hold back from that. The other thing I want to say, I want to talk to you about for a moment is the place you come from in your work with kids. There's something I call finding your spot. So when I talk to parents about this, they'll tell me, you know, I can't get my kids out the door in the morning. I can't get my kids to stop fighting. I can't get my kid to sit at the table. And then I'll often ask them, what about car seats and seat belts? Oh yeah, they're always buckled in. I mean, that's safety. And I say, but really, why do they do that and not this? And the parent will say, well, it's non-negotiable. Or they often start off saying it's the law. And I have to say, oh, they're reading law books. And eventually they'll say, well, I'm clear about that. That's non-negotiable. And so what I want to say is when I work with after-school staff and educators of all kinds, and they talk to me about things being out of control or what doesn't work, I'll often ask, what does work? What does go well? Can you get the group gathered? Does this kid respond to this or that you've said or asked for? And often the difference is your own clarity, that you're what I call on your spot. And what puts you on your spot is your head says, this is the right thing to do. I mean, if I let one kid go there, they'll all go there. And so I have to be clear. No, we don't go there. We stay here. So your good judgment, what your head says. Do you have the heart to insist on it? Sometimes our head says, you know, I need to make this kid do this, but I don't have the heart for it, because my heart goes out to them. But you need your head and your heart lined up. I do have the heart to do this. Your gut, what does your instinct tell you? Like some kid is acting out and it's so aggravating, but your gut tells you this kid is hurting. This kid is hurting. That's your gut. So when your head, your heart, and your instincts all line up, that's when you can stand firm. That's when you're clear. That's when you can walk your talk about what you know. I call that being on your spot. We often get thrown off our spot for one reason or another. We know we should do something, but our soft heart doesn't let us be as firm as we should be, or we're activated. And so our survival instinct makes us harsher than we want to be. So it's when we're all lined up that we do our best work and do our best relating. So the next thing I want to say in the list of perspectives, and bear with me for talking fast, I have a lot I want to say to you guys while we're together, is that when kids there's misbehavior, there are challenging things going on with what kids are doing. Relate to those interactions between kids or that you're having with a kid as a moment, not a defining moment. When a child tells a lie, they're telling a lie. They're not speaking the truth. It doesn't make them a liar. When a child's mean, it doesn't make them a bully. When a child whines, it doesn't make them a whiner. It's just a moment. And when we characterize people by the moment they are having, they start living down to that reputation. They start believing, remember what I said earlier about your influence, they begin to believe that that is who they are because they've been defined. And believe me, we parents do that all the time. We do that all the time unintentionally. We really don't mean to. But at home, I often say that at home is kind of a fixed menu where people have roles and they get characterized by these moments. And then they're kind of stuck with that identity. At least in their programs at school, kids have a chance. It's more of a buffet. It's not a fixed menu. Maybe you're this with these people and that with those people. And as leaders, you really want to give kids the opportunity to not be defined by a moment they have. And the other thing that happens is if you look at behavior as an expression of the context a kid is in that moment, like they didn't have enough sleep or food, or home life has been difficult, or they're somehow triggered by something another kid did, or there's a misunderstanding or some bigger context, we will feel empathy for that kid and we'll feel more encouraged about having a positive impact or having good influence. But if you think of it as a defining moment, you get judgmental and negative, and it's just much harder to do. So, by the way, this applies to yourself. If you lose it, you get harsh, you just lose control of the room and get ineffective in some way. That was just a difficult moment too. It's not a defining moment about you and your work. And what do you do when you have a moment like that? You catch yourself and then you do the next right thing. I'm always telling everybody if they haven't seen Frozen 2, they should see Frozen 2, because it's all about when you make a mistake, you just do the next right thing. So here are some other things to consider before I get to your tips and tools. Kids' behavior always makes sense if only you knew the rest of the story. Often we do get to know the rest of the story and we have a lot of compassion for that, but sometimes we don't get to know the rest of the story. And so you just have to trust me that kids' behavior, and actually grown-ups too, always makes sense if only you knew the rest of the story. And also when you understand where something's coming from, even if it's really unacceptable behavior, you have a different attitude toward that behavior than when you don't have that assumption. So, for example, kids that are really aggressive and mean to other kids pretty consistently are often anxious. And we have a different reflex to respond to a kid we consider anxious than we do to a kid we consider aggressive. And sadly, when an anxious kid behaves in an aggressive way and we relate to them like they're aggressive, makes them more anxious, then you get more of that difficult behavior. If you relate to that child as being anxious, it calms them down because they feel seen and known. So it's always worth taking a moment, unless there is a safety emergency of some kind, to get a sense of the story behind a kid's behavior if you can. And if you can't, give them the benefit of the doubt and know that something's going on that's making this moment, and see if you can't move through that moment. And I also want to say that often kids are truly doing the best they can, or parents are doing the best they can, and the best they can is just terrible. And it doesn't mean their behavior is acceptable just because they're doing the best they can. You still have to set those limits. You still have to scaffold that. You still have to be clear where the lines are, but you have a different attitude as you approach it. So I was asked recently what could be done for a child who seeks to hurt or hit classmates for fun. So the first thing I want to know is, how do you know it's for fun? If you treat a kid like they're out to hurt people for fun because they kick and hurt them and then they laugh, looks like fun, but you don't know the rest of the story. You don't know what's happening for that kid. And then somebody will say, well, the child laughed after they did it. Well, we laugh out of anxiety. We laugh out of self-consciousness. We laugh to save face. And so it's really important to know that. I want to give you a couple of examples. There was a kindergarten teacher was talking to me about a little boy. Her heart broke because this little boy seemed to really want to have friends, but he would run up to kids and knock them down and then lay on top of them. It did not make him popular. Other kids were alienated, didn't want to go near him. And bless this kindergarten teacher's soul, when she talked to the parent, instead of saying your kid is aggressive and a bad kid, said, could you help me understand why your kid seems to greet kids this way? And the mom said, you know, he's the youngest of 4 boys in our family, and this is how they say hello. They pile on each other. And he doesn't, you know, I was home with him until kindergarten, and I don't think he knows anything else. So the teacher talked to the kid about better ways to make a friend, and that went better. But you could imagine how that might have gone in another direction had the teacher had a different attitude. I want to tell you another example, which is I was working with a after-school program at a school where one kid knocked a kid down and was kicking him on the ground. Another kid was laughing. The supervisor that came over took care of the kid that got hurt, took care of the kid that had done the kicking, and then the kid that was doing the laughing said, why would you laugh when that was going on? And the kid said, well, that was funny. And I think this supervisor was so upset, they sent the kid to some administrator. And the administrator said, why would you laugh? And the kid said, well, because it's funny. So they called the parents. And the parents ended up calling me. And because they asked the kid, why would you laugh? And he said, it was funny. That's not funny. So fortunately for that kid, I could see where it would be funny, that slapstick can be funny. So everybody's telling this kid it's not funny. And I said to the kid, I could see where it would be funny. He was so relieved that I could see where it could be funny. I said, so something happened that looked funny and somebody else was getting hurt, which thing matters the most? He just didn't know. He looked, I don't know. The parents were sitting there because remember, I only do family therapy. And I asked the parents, if somebody's being hurt and something's funny, what matters the most? The parents said it always matters the most that somebody's being hurt. That always matters the most. And the kid said, oh, he genuinely didn't know that. Which brings me to my next point, is that sometimes what we call misbehavior is kids just trying to figure out how the world works. Like, what happens if I do this? What happens if I do that? And sometimes they just genuinely don't know. They're doing what we call testing or experimenting to see. And it's our job as grown-ups to tell them, this is how it works. But if you start off criticizing them for what they've done, their neural pathways close down and they don't take in what you've said. If you meet them with, maybe you don't know this. Let me give you some more information. Something different happens. Also, sometimes you run into a can't instead of a won't. So you get a kid who blurts and interrupts when other kids talk. And I often hear educators talk about kids making bad choices. And I hear kids all the time talk to me about bad choices, or they tell me I made a bad choice. And I like the part about the agency and making choices, but we have to be careful not to label something a choice that might not be a choice. An impulsive kid doesn't choose to blurt out and interrupt somebody. They're having trouble containing themselves. So again, knowing the rest of the story, being able to help them contain or remind them or sit them in the front so that they don't do that. The other thing is that every now and then you have a kid who just the way their wiring is, when you tell them don't do this, don't do that, they hear the this and the that, but they don't take in the don't. And we have to be really careful. I had a teacher talk to me one time about, she said, let me give you an example of why this kid is oppositional. That we had to go somewhere and they were doing some work on the yard and there was a hose there. And I said to all the kids, first grade, don't step on the hose. And this kid went right up to the hose and stepped on it. And she said, everybody else went up on the grass and walked around. And this kid went right to the sidewalk and stepped on the hose. So see, he's oppositional. And I said, had you said everybody walk on the grass, the kid would have walked on the grass. It's hard for some kids to, first of all, resist once they're excited about something they heard. And also they just hear step on the hose, the operative term. So think about our communication. I have so many more things to talk to you about. Most kids don't understand the impact of their behaviors, or that there's even a difference between intention and impact. I had one kid who we really worked on scaffolding his behavior when he was around other kids and gave him a lot of structure, a lot of support. And I asked him, how are things going now when you're with groups of kids? And I said, how are you able to manage yourself? He said, well, I'm the same, but everybody else has gotten a lot nicer. And that so charmed me because I realized that this kid never intended to alienate or bother kids or hurt them. That was never his intention. So when he stopped doing it, he didn't notice that he had changed. He just noticed that everybody else was being nice because it hadn't been his intention. It's really important to distinguish between intention and impact. If I say to you, you look nice today, and you say to me, are you saying I looked ugly last time you saw me? I'm having a negative impact from a question that I meant to be flattering. So what do I do with that? The first thing I do is say, I'm so sorry if it sounded that way. I hadn't meant to do that. I had meant to say that blue sweater looks really nice on you. I'm responsible for my impact, just like if somebody knocks me and I knock somebody else down, I say, oh, are you okay? And help them up. It's so not my fault, but I had an impact and I let the other person know my intention. Between kids, taking responsibility for an impact you had, whether you intended it or not, is important. And accepting that somebody's intention wasn't how it landed on you is equally important. So there's two things that children need to know about themselves to feel good about themselves and have self-esteem. One is that they're special and unique and there's no one else like them. The other is that they're just like everybody else. The art of working with kids or parenting kids is knowing when to give which message. So what's really important is kids need to be recognized when they have been, when they have done something impressive or remarkable or beautiful or kind or special in some way, to let them know that so they can take that inside. And when they're out of line and their behavior is difficult, they need to know that everybody does this sometimes, that they're just like everybody else. And also when you set limits with kids, having them understand that everybody has to do this. You're not being singled out. To the extent that you can remind the whole group that we do something, we're all going to do this instead of singling a kid out. That's great. But if you do have to single a kid out and you've talked to them on the side, to say, you know, everybody has to do this, or this is hard for everybody when a kid says something's hard. When we have to give a kid a timeout or a break, to say everyone needs a break sometimes. Speaking of timeouts and breaks, I want to say that I have really been around the block a bunch of times, and I want to tell you that research is now supporting something that I've observed out in the world for a long time. Punishment does not work. It just simply does not work. It's not effective. There's all kinds of research substantiating that. The only thing it's effective at is generating resentment. Now, results that make sense to a child do work. So for example, in a sports game, you're playing baseball and somebody keeps going out of bounds or somebody gets disruptive on the field and they're sent to the bench. That's actually a result that makes sense to the players, no matter how old they are. We want the game to go on, you're disrupting the game. If you're sent away from a dinner table or a snack table at school, it's because everybody else wants to enjoy their meal. You're making that hard right now. Your behavior is making that hard right now. It seems like you need a break. Let's take a break. And when you're ready, you can come back and join us. So a timeout that comes from, let's take a reset. Let's disrupt the thing that's not going well, disrupt the disruptive, and get a reset, works well. But it's not about you have to go over there for 20 minutes to do time for your crime. That won't work. So it's the place you're coming from. And while I'm talking about the place you're coming from, I think I want to say that threats, bribes, cajoling, all of those seem to signal to kids, they pick up the signal that we're feeling out of control, we grown-ups, when we are resorting to that. Then I get asked so much by parents in particular, Is it okay to bribe a kid? Is it okay to threaten a kid? Because threats have leverage and they work. So why would I give that up? And so what I want you to understand is that it is true that when you have leverage, it does help. It does help disrupt. It does help disrupt the momentum when a kid's on a roll. But the part about threats that are problematic is that kids who are threatened pretty consistently end up being threateners or being super susceptible to threats. And you don't want to raise kids or teach kids to be either of those. So what can you do when you need leverage, but you've got me telling you that threats aren't healthy for kids? This is the easiest tip. I'm going to move into tips now that you will get from me today, which is change your language away. No more if-thens. If you keep doing that, you can't play the game. If you don't get your homework done, you can't join in the activity outside. If you keep acting like that, you're going to lose all your friends. If-thens don't work, but when-thens accomplish something important. When your homework's done, sure, you can go out and play with them when your homework's done. When you treat people this way, this is what happens. Those are encouraging. That gives you the incentive and the leveraging of a threat without the bad side effects. And parents report to me. It's my favorite tip to give parents when I'm with groups of parents, because I hear back from them that is the quickest way they make a difference in the climate at home. That once those if-thens go away, those when-thens. And honestly, when you see kids that are controlled by other kids threatening them, and the grown-ups in their lives stop threatening them, move to when-then, those kids stand up to those threats in a different way, because it doesn't have the power of grown-up support for doing that. Another thing I want to say is that there are a lot of kids who what we call misbehavior is really an expression of them having shame. Like we call them out, then they have shame in front of the other kids, or shame that they didn't control themselves, or shame that they need to be corrected or criticized for something they did. And shame really doesn't bring out the best in us as human beings. We just are not designed to carry a bunch of shame. So the minute someone shames us, we can't learn from them. We move into behaviors that have to do with saving face. And I'll tell you why. You know how we all have a survival instinct to stay alive? Well, in our species, the human species, also has a survival instinct to not be, to keep our identity intact. So if somebody says to us, you know, that we're a meanie, or we're a bully, or that was a stupid thing to do, or look what you did after I told you not to, now look what you did. That kind of shame makes a kid feel less than. And so their sense of identity is threatened, and then they get defensive, and nobody behaves well when they're defensive. So you want to bypass that shame trigger. And some of these when-then, some of them giving kids the benefit of the doubt, assuming the fact is behind all behavior, all out of line behavior, is a need. Sometimes that need is for more information, more instruction, more direction. Sometimes that need, like the little boy who laughed, was to understand what's more important when there's competing things. Sometimes that need is to understand the impact you're having on someone. They don't think this is funny. This teasing isn't funny for them. And sometimes the need is for attention. And sometimes the need is for containment. I'm going to stop you. Oh, thank goodness you're stopping me. But there's always a need. And if you can think about kids that are misbehaving as having a need and trying to figure out what that need is, you'll bypass that shame and things will go much better. The other thing to think about is when you get kids, one kind of misbehavior, I'm talking about misbehavior that's really disruptive, but there's also a behavior that's frustrating in after school programs, which is a kid saying, I can't do it. I can't do it. And we want to move kids from I can't do it to how can I do it? And so one of the things is that kids have patternings and language, they're just used to that. It's kind of a learned helplessness thing, like, I can't do it. And then you start arguing, yes, you can. No, they can't. Just like that little kid who said it was funny. They can't do it. But if you replace I can't do it with say, well, how about asking how can you do it? And let's look at ways that you can do it. Or let's look at what you can do. That's going to help a lot. Also, using language, it's the language that we use, are things like for now or not yet, so that kids feel encouraged and not shut off from possibilities. I want to talk about some actual tools, and I'm going to put them in terms that hopefully you can hold on to and pull up when you can. One is skip the teachable moments. We all love teachable moments where we take kids aside and tell them and explain to them. Parents, really, those of you who are parents that are listening, we're all guilty of these teachable moments we give our kids. Most kids just sort of tolerate our teachable moments. I have one friend I had who had a gaggle of kids that seemed to manage them best by saying, do we need to have a talk about this? And they just got in the line right away because they dreaded her teachable moments. So nothing is coming through in that same way in a teachable moment. So rather than those, we want to show, we want to have a brief interaction. We want to say to a kid, you know, he didn't like that, and that matters that he's not liking it. So let's find some way of playing with him that he will like too, because it needs to be fun for both of you. That's a showing, that's an instruction that will move things along. But to sit down and say, why do you do this? And you shouldn't do this, and look what it does, that won't go anywhere. A really good intervention to have with kids when things get out of line is to say, this is what happened. And you can say, I know you may not have meant this, but this is what happened. He got knocked down and hurt. Now he's really upset. This is the impact it's had. And this is what I'd like from you. I'd like you to make it right with him. Helping kids make it right when they've misstepped, when they've gotten out of line, is probably the greatest gift you can give them to help them be resilient. That we want to support kids' agility to pivot when something isn't going well and to come back from things that are hard. But I always like to say, you know, everybody talks about resilience, it's the big word, but you know, it isn't just the ball knocks you down and you get back up, but the ball's coming at you. You want to be able to move to the side, dodge it, get under it, catch it. You want to have some agility too. And how we work with kids helps foster that. So another thing is to be able to keep things neutral instead of saying, you're so disruptive that you have to go sit on the bench, to say, you know, when the game gets interrupted, that person needs to sit on the bench. That's just how it works. It takes the sting out. It makes you feel like you're just like everybody else. We all have these moments, and kids are more responsive. The other thing is to only give feedback that has a point about behavior that can be changed. My own mom was very fond of saying, now look what you did. If I spilled something or got rowdy and did something wrong, there's nothing I can do with now look what you did. But if you say, oops, the milk spilled, here's a paper towel, clean it up. That's feedback I can use, but move your glass over so you don't keep bumping it. Here's a paper towel. That's feedback I can use and behavior that can be changed. You want to attend to not just what's, but how's. How you're talking to a kid, not just what you're saying. You might be saying something so valid and important, but what's your tone? Is it respectful? Are you defining the kid or just relating to the moment? How you handle things. And the same thing is true with kids. It's not always what they say, but it's how they say it. And you want to focus as much on the how as the what. By the way, you need to, again, not confuse impact and intention. To say, you know, you're giving me attitude right now, that's ascribing intention to a kid that may not be their intention. But you can say, I don't like to be talked to that way. It doesn't fly with me. That's the impact. You can say, you may not be meaning to alienate me, but it's hard for me to listen to you when you talk to me like that. Let's try it again. When you're dealing with groups of kids day in and day out, you have to make some decisions. Take it on or let it go. Don't nag. If you're not really going to take a moment on, then just let it go, honestly. If you nag, if you talk to the back of kids' heads, if you keep saying things that aren't going anywhere, they stop listening to you. To keep your credibility, take it on or let it go. Stay out of the nag zone. I tell parents this all the time. Kids really start to listen to you if you really mean it, what you say, and say what you mean. You always want to point out the positive with kids every time you can. That's another way to get them not to dismiss you, because if they're only used to being corrected, they start to tune you out. If you say positive things, they keep their ears open because maybe that's going to happen. The other thing I want to say about us grown-ups working with kids is, for some reason, we are also the only species that keeps doing things that don't work. No other species does things that don't work. You know, they've done studies about rats running mazes, and they have cheese at the end, and the rats run the maze for the cheese. They take the cheese away, and the rats, they don't run anymore. And then they have built human mazes and put $10 at the end, and people would run the maze to get the $10, run the maze. They took the $10 away and people kept doing it. They kept running anyways, thinking this time it'll work. But one important piece of advice is, if something you do with a kid or a group of kids doesn't work, do something else. And people say, what else should I do? Almost anything else. Just don't do the same thing. Also, when you surprise kids, when something unexpected comes from you, they stop and pay attention. They're much more receptive to something than when they can predict negative things. They like to predict positive things from you, but when they can predict negative interactions, they cancel them out. So you want to surprise a kid and show up with a different way of approaching something. You want to keep hard moments right-sized. It's a Goldilocks thing. You don't want to make too little of a deal about something that matters. You want to address it, but you don't want to make too big a deal with a big teachable moment or talking to kids in front of the group. You want to keep those moments right-sized. And you really do want to let kids know it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to make missteps. We all do that. And then you just make it right. You do the next right thing. Those kinds of things really help kids. I also want to talk about translating some of what I've talked about today for other kinds of situations, like what I said about leaning in with the kid who thought it was funny to see a kid being kicked. You want to lean into where the kid is so you can join them where they are and bring them over to where you are. If you don't lean into where they are, then they're over here, you're over here, and you're in a power struggle, won't go anywhere. So for example, a kid that says, I miss my mommy, and is really sad about that. And it's been weeks. And you say, come on, it's been weeks. We're doing this, we're doing that. Isn't going to go anywhere. To be able to go over and say, of course you do. Of course you miss your mommy. I know how much you love her. And let's make the best of it, though, because she has to work and you're here. So let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can do to make this the most fun possible. But lean in and join the kid where they are before you move back. And to the extent that you can, partner with kids about solutions. What do you think would make you feel better? What do you think would be another way that we could say that? If you were that kid, what would you want from somebody? It helps them be stakeholders in the solutions. I also want to say that in general, more often than not, kids really do not understand the impact of their behaviors. They didn't set out to alienate, to make life harder for themselves. Nobody's out to be destructive of themselves, even when what they do is self-destructive. They're coping with something. And so to the extent that you can start off with benefit of the doubt, assuming the best and finding the best in them and bringing it forward, you'll be making a major contribution to their lives. And the last thing I want to say is, honestly, I've done a lot of training of graduate students and such, and I have a little thing I like to do to ask them, name 3 times in your life when you felt helped, because help comes in so many different forms. And we write on the board the kind of help. Sometimes help is new information. Sometimes help is money. Sometimes help is a little nudge. Sometimes help is facing the truth. There's all kinds of ways that we help. But when I asked that question, name 3 times, over the years that I taught graduate students, out of those 3 times, 2 out of 3 were either teachers, some kind of summer camp counselors, after school leaders, grown-ups that worked with these kids in groups were the most influential people, 2 out of 3, over and over again. So I just want to remind you that whether you can see it or not, whether you know it or not, whether you have the good fortune of getting the feedback or not, you really are making a difference. And I want to thank you for that. So, Ren, back to you.
Thank you so much, Sheri, and welcome, panel. Sheri, you gave us beautiful information on a macro perspective on challenging behavior and many different tools that we can use. And I just want to let you know that we had a question come in for you specifically, that is, would you put rewards for good work in the same category as bribes? For example, there's an app that allows parents to pay their children for completing chores or other tasks.
Here's the way I feel about that. I've been focused on the after school program part of things, but on the parenting side of things, what I feel is that home life is a training ground for how the world works. And often the behavior that you'll see when I say that kids' behavior makes sense if only you knew the rest of the story. Sometimes the rest of the story is expectations that they come to school with that are based on what's happened in their home life. So families often do reward systems and things like that. The reason being that they want things to run more smoothly at home, and that's leverage and it's helpful. However, it can set up an expectation that you get rewards for things, so that when you say to your kid, oh, there's some groceries in the car, I need some help to carry it in, and the kid said, okay, how much? Well, we have a problem with that because we carry in groceries because we partake in eating them. And this is just a thing you do because you're a member of the family. So my feeling about rewards, and we reward in school programs, we reward in after school programs. Reward is a real thing that happens in life, but it happens either because something happened that was above and beyond the call of everyday life, because we're celebrating an accomplishment. There are all kinds of reasons for rewards, but you want to be sure that they reflect the way the world works. And so kids don't have an expectation that they get reimbursement for things that are just everyday expectations. And when you see a kid make a special effort and you're encouraging or marking that effort, call it an encouragement. Don't call it a reward. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks. That came from an anonymous attendee, so I'll just ask our attendee if you'd like to put in chat if you have another comment about that. And while you're doing that, I want to say hello again to Sheba and Ludecea. And I'm going to remind you that I'm going to invite you to talk a little bit more about who you are and what you do. And I'd love for you to respond to what you heard Sheri talk about, and also what are you seeing? What are you seeing around young people's behavior? And who would like to go first?
I'll go.
All right, thank you, Sheba.
So my name is Autrilla Gillis. I'm the Director of Expanded Learning for ISANA Academies, which is a network of charter schools that are scattered all over Los Angeles. Our schools are K-8. Professionally, I bring sort of a mixed bag of experience. I've been a classroom teacher. I taught middle school history. I've been a curriculum specialist. I've been a principal, and I'm currently in the director capacity. I sit on lots of committees and different things at the county level and on the state level. Last year, I was awarded the California Charter School Association's Educator of the Year. So I'm a mixed bag of experience. And I feel like in 17 years, I've seen a little bit of everything. Every now and then I'm surprised by a behavior and I'm like, whoa, didn't see that coming. But I'd say 90% of the challenging behaviors that I encounter, I'm like, okay, it's doable. We've seen this before. As Sheri was talking, I made notes. There were a couple of things she said that resonated with me that I like to impart to my staff. So our schools are inner city schools. And so we see our students come onto campus each day and they're dealing with things that as a 44-year-old adult, I have not encountered. And some of those things are heavy. And some of those things at the end of the day, when I take a step back, just break my heart. And so to see these, we call them scholars, navigating through that and trying to be good students, right? And trying to keep their head above water sometimes is defeating. One of the ways that I've asked my staff to combat that is to forge genuine relationships. And so it's so comforting and reassuring for me that our school sites, especially our after school programs, they are little families. And I would say that coming back from COVID more than ever, since I've taken the position as director, we have not had that many behavior issues. And I think that it's because we were so deliberate coming back on campus and forging genuine relationships and really getting to know the students, getting to know their families, so that when there is an issue or when there is a problem, it's not right away we're looking at a consequence at all. I had a student come in my office a few weeks ago who's normally very loving and sweet, and she's a third grader, but she loves to talk to me about horoscopes. And so that's who I know her to be. But she came in because she hit someone on the yard, and I could just look at her. And because I have that genuine relationship with her, I could see that she wasn't herself. And so I said, do you want to talk about it? And she said, no. And I said, that's fine. I have some work to do. You can just sit. And that's one of the things that I make sure that we do at ISANA. It literally is on their terms. So if that means that we talk about it that day, that's fine. But if it means that it rolls over to tomorrow because you need to sit on it, that's fine too. We'll revisit the conversation. But when she was finally ready, she came over and I said, I think you need a hug. Do you need a hug? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, bring it in. And she gave me the longest hug. And when we let go, she was crying. And I said, what's going on? She said, I didn't mean to hit her. That's my friend. She said, my cousin moved out and she took her dog and I really miss that dog. And now there's a new dog and he doesn't like me. And I said, oh man, I said, I think I can see how that would bother you. I said, what should we do though? Because your friend's upset. And we utilize something called a behavior hierarchy. And because it's very clear expectations with our students and the families, she knew how to handle the process herself. She said, I think I should go get her. We should talk about it. I'm going to apologize. And maybe I'll just sit out and I won't play that game for the rest of the week. And I was so proud of her because she walked herself through it. Something else that you said was that to identify between moments and defining moments. And so my staff, I cut them off all the time. When they introduce a student to me, or if a student is walking, they'll say, well, you know, that student, he did it. I don't want to hear that. No, we don't label these kids. They don't get stuck in actions that they've done in the past. I want you to introduce them to me and tell me what's great about them. Let me forge my own relationship with that student. And so I thought that that was powerful. And then one more thing that you said that I wrote down, because I'm going to put it on Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else later. Thank you, Sheri. You said when you have a moment, catch yourself and do the next right thing. And so I think that that is so important for myself and for my staff and the demographic of students that we work with, that we're human. They need to see you being human. Sometimes you're going to lose your cool, but they're looking to see how you rebound from that. So are you going to come back and apologize? Are you going to address it? Or are you just going to act like it didn't happen? And so I know that for a lot of my staff, that is molding them and turning them into better people as well, because our workforce is so young, but really being able to allow them to be vulnerable and to stand in those moments as well. That's it for me.
Thank you so much, Sheba. Ludecea, who are you?
Yeah, that was very beautiful. My name is Ludecea. I am the mental health clinician and consultant at YMCA in San Francisco. I provide mental health services to school-age children through high school, that's in the school community as well as out in the community, like their neighborhood. And then I also work with families within the YMCA youth development programs, or like the after-school programs that are offered through the agency. And I'm currently on a team that is, like we're working on providing a training very similar to this. It's very focused on this topic to help staff manage those challenging behaviors in the after-school program using trauma-informed techniques. I am very new to my position with the Y, and so a lot of things that I am working on are very new and continuing to develop. So a lot of like the information that Sheri has shared is what I will also be providing to those staff as they continue to work with students in the after-school programs. One of the things that really stood out for me, as Sheri was talking about, is the moment, you defining the, not defining, but giving attention to the moments that the kiddos are having. I like to refer to kids as kiddos. I don't know why, but I will be using that term.
I love it.
But yeah, focusing on the moments that they're having as opposed to using those moments to characterize who they are as individuals. What I do like in my work that I have done with kids, what I do like to say, especially if there's the a kiddo that's observing what's happening with another kiddo, and the kiddo that's observing, we usually ask, what is going on with this person? So it's like my response to them is they're having a moment. And I have also found that by me saying that they're having a moment kind of helps me to reset and be in what Sheri has referred to, in the place that I need to be able to respond to what's happening for that kiddo having the moment. And I think that is so powerful within itself, because it's using an intervention for yourself, providing care for that student while you're providing care for that student in intervention. I don't have a whole lot to say, because a lot of what I'm working on is still being developed. But in my experience, a lot of what Sheri has shared are the interventions that I use with my care and services that I provide.
Thank you so much. Are you seeing, what kinds of behavior are you seeing, or are after-school workers reporting?
Yeah, some of the behaviors that are being reported are kids hitting each other, or like Sheri has shared, laughing at another kid that's being hurt. When they're giving instructions, they're running away and just running around as opposed to, falling in line or doing what they're being asked to do. And a lot of it is, the do not run in the hallway. But then they run in the hallway still, or do not run across the street. It's something that I heard from a parent yesterday, and that kid ran across the street and she was feeling really frustrated. Like, I just said, do not. But yeah, oftentimes that do not, it just skips, and they just don't hear it. So there's a lot of that's coming up. Like I said, I told them to not do this, but they're still doing it. Like, I don't know what else to do. So helping staff to reframe their language is really, really big.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with me, a lot of the behavior issues that we've seen, the few that we have seen, have been defiance towards staff members. And I think that can be attributed more to the transient staffing. I'm sure everyone is still having high rates of turnover and difficulty staffing. And so in those classrooms where there are frequent subs or where there is revolving staff, those are the classes that I notice have the most behavior issues. And I solely attribute that to the fact that those genuine connections have not been built. One of the things we say to people in the interview process is that with this demographic of students, they're used to people walking out of their lives and breaking promises. And so we ask for at least a 1-year commitment, because we know that can be devastating to some of our students. And so I think that a lot of the issues we've seen can be attributed to that.
For sure.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to offer the attendees you can either raise your hand. I'm happy to bring you off camera to join in this conversation, or you can post a question in the question and answer box or the chat. So I'm curious, I know, Ludecea, you talked about developing something to support staff people in dealing with challenging behaviors. Sheba, I heard you talk a lot about how you talk to your staff. Are there specific trainings you engage in, or are there specific processes you engage in to support staff to work with challenging behaviors?
We do ongoing rolling professional development on dealing with challenging behaviors, and we take it from a stakeholder perspective. So how do you interact with a challenging teacher? Because there are some spaces that are safe spaces, and there are other spaces where they do not want after school anywhere near their classroom. So we have those conversations. We talk about parents, and we use actual scenarios that have happened with parents. And I try to teach them to identify, just through verbiage, through conversation, when you can realize that, whoa, this isn't about me. I'm your sounding board, you're unleashing on me, but this is not about me at all. But that's something that we have really, really, really had to practice. And so it literally is ongoing professional development, at least twice a month. Those are training topics. And so how do you, just different situations and scenarios. I have 2 learning facilitators, one for our southern region and one for our north. And so they know specifically what challenging behaviors they experience. And so that's in place. But I think too, part of the reason that we're so successful with behaviors is because we created something called a behavior hierarchy. And so the behavior hierarchy has 5 steps. You can be put on the behavior hierarchy for incidents of like major physical aggression, not just pushing and shoving someone because they're on your spot in the line, disruption of school property, and major disruption of programming. And so in our parent orientations, we run it down. It's like a 5-minute component, and we want parents to understand, we want your child in this program and we want them to be successful, but there are limitations to that. And so the first step is what we call an on-campus suspension. And our staff knows, parents know, everyone knows. And in that on-campus suspension, you literally are doing a reflection. And so whatever it is that you've done, there's a whole reflection packet. And so an example, we had a student who was very fond of the B word and just kept throwing it. And so like the first sheet of that was definitions. Here's the Webster dictionary. I want you to write down the actual definition and then create 10 sentences using this definition. And then there was like 3 or 4 pages about dogs and, you know, all the things that dogs go through. And then who did your behavior impact? That's a big one for us, because sometimes in a moment, even as adults, we can only see our perspective. And so an important part of behavior for us is, who else did this impact? Okay, the person that I said it to, my program leader, because they had to stop the whole class to deal with it. I was like, don't forget me, because I was already doing something and I had to stop what I'm doing to interact with this. And what about your parents? Oh yeah, they're probably going to be embarrassed. And so then they write letters out and then they cycle back to all of those people. So that's step 1. Step 2 is a 1-day off-campus suspension. Does not impact day school, only impacts after school. Usually our students come back and they're like, they're not playing with me. Okay, I got it together. But every now and then, there are those that transition to the next step. Step 2 is a 2-day off-campus suspension. But before you can come back on campus, we sit down, the program leader, the site coordinator, your parents, and you, and we have a very real conversation. Look, we want you to be successful. What are some things that are triggering you? Who's your safe person that you can talk to on campus when you feel yourself getting agitated? And then we talk to parents. What are some things you do at home to combat behaviors? So we come up with a whole behavior plan. We do incentives. Okay, we notice that you're having problems transitioning. If you can transition 3 out of 5 days this week, here's a list of possible rewards. And I know we talked about rewards, but sometimes we need rewards just to kickstart the situation and then gently pull the rewards back. If you make it to the next step, and this only happens once a year out of all of our school sites, you're exited from our program for the remainder of the school year. But because there's that expectation and it's widely known between students and parents and staff, it helps students to regulate their behavior, but we're also more deliberate. And so I'm very, very selective about who I put on the behavior hierarchy and what they're being put on the behavior hierarchy for, because we know that there are other alternatives to that.
Thank you. Helpful. There's just something came up in the question and answer from Natasha, who says, Ms. Gillis gives the best training. She taught me QTIP, which is quit taking it personal.
I tell my staff all the time, it is not about you. It's not about you.
Sometimes it feels that way.
Mhm.
There's another question for Sheri. Do you have any suggestions on handling a kiddo who is a kinder who runs and wants to chase, who only wants to do the activity they are focused on to the point they refuse to do anything, starts to hiss at you, throws things, then leads to either running circles or in the room or down the hallways?
This is a great example of a can't versus a won't. This sounds like a child that has drives, that has, at the very least, ants in their pants. And so what I would want to do is understand more about that and be sure this kid gets to get energy out. Lots of kids who want things on their own terms, who says, no, it has to be on my terms. do that because they can't do it on the other terms. You know, kids who are bossy in games and everything has to be, they have to be in control of everything, is often because they can't follow somebody else's directions. They can't figure it out. But if they've made it up, then they know what to do. This is a kid who, this is what this kid can do right then. So finding a way to let that kid do that, to, if that kid feels like you're in the way of the only thing they know how to do, they're going to hiss at you because that's an instinct. But to be able to say, I see you need to do that. Let's find a way you can do that where that doesn't disrupt things, and pay some attention. I would also try to talk to the parents to say, I've noticed that this happens, share an observation with no assumptions, no interpretations, just the observation. I noticed this happens. Is this something you notice at home? What have you found has been helpful? And partner with the parents about this. I love about having the Sheba and both of you were talking about working with staffs, about working with parents, and how important that is, because most people who work with kids have training in kids, but not training in collaborating with adults and all the grown-ups in a kid's life. Whether you're after school, whether you're the day teacher, whether you're a parent, we're all shift workers on the same job of trying to support kids. So learning how to talk and collaborate with each other in a way that's not alienating, or not letting yourself get alienated, as you were saying, Sheba. So that would be what I would do. I would lean in. I would start with the givens and see where to go from there. What can I do with this?
Thank you, Sheri. Other questions or comments about this particular topic? Again, you can raise your hand. I'll bring you off on mic. Any other comments or questions? All right, Christina has raised her hand. Let me get you. Okay, Christina, welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
So I love all the pointers and all the strategies that we could use. I've definitely seen a lot of our kids needing it. One behavior that I've been struggling with is, what if a child doesn't want to be there, but they have to be there, and they're also like flight risk? What I've tried in the past is, this one student didn't want to be there, and he would always just walk off. He was a 5th grader. He would just walk off and try to actually leave campus. And I'm always trying to, talk to him and be like, what's going on? Why do you want to leave? Also, like, what can we do to make your experience better? And he was just saying, like, I don't want to do homework. I don't want to do the activities. I don't want to do anything. I just don't want to be here. And unfortunately, we can't just be like, well, you can't just walk away, because he'll just keep doing it. So what are things that we can remedy that for the future? I mean, he's not with me anymore, but it was definitely the biggest challenge I've had.
We've had that. We have it all the time with our middle schoolers. And so typically what I tell my staff is to pick and choose your battles. And so we know that the structure of our program is that we provide the activities. We know that our activities are not everyone's cup of tea. And so in doing that, we've asked students to articulate, like, what are things that you are interested in, so that we can incorporate those things more. And then just having a really real conversation with those students about what the non-negotiables are in our program. There are some things that are negotiable. There are other things that are non-negotiable. So for the non-negotiable parts, what are things that we can do to make our program more appealing or more enjoyable for you?
Got it. Thank you.
I would also add to that the relationship part, that instead of, you're keeping me here and I want to go, which puts you in different camps. what would put you in the same camp is, you know, we're both in a situation where it's, you need to be here and I'm responsible to keep you here, to be
Yeah.
sure you don't leave. And so we're in the same boat. I don't want to have to make you be somewhere you don't want to be, but that's my job. And you don't want to be somewhere you don't want to be, but that's where you are. And to forge that relationship that we all have been talking about, put it on a relationship basis, that, you know, we're in the same boat. What can we do together to make this tolerable? It might not be fun. It might not be your first choice, but how can we make it work the best we can? Start from where the kid is. But put yourself in the same boat instead of us, them kind of setup.
And we know that part of our quality standards from CDE says like the student voice, student choice. And I think that as like designers of our programs, it's so important that we take that into consideration, because there's such a big age gap. I know a lot of things that I think are cool. The kids are like, Miss Gillis, what? No. So really allowing them to voice what they're interested in, so that they feel tied and vested to their program, and so that they're not giving you and the staff such a hard time because there are activities and things that they actually want to do.
I have one last thing to add. Kids who don't like to participate for reasons we might not know, so they don't want to join the other kids, they don't want to do those activities, you can sometimes make them your assistant and ask them to help you and to do things for you. And you'd be surprised that a kid that's been giving you such a hard time is so responsive to being a helper, to giving. They can't take, but they can give. So giving them a role and saying, look, I know you don't want to be here, but I could really use some help with this, and making a place for them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for adding that, Sheri. That's what I was going to share, because I know in one of our after school program right now, that was one of the intervention that I had suggested to one of the leaders, and she did it and it worked great. And now it's something that that student looks forward to doing each time that she's in after school. I also want to add that it may be an opportunity to partner with the parents, so that they are also on the same page and supporting the plans that are in place in after school for that kiddo. You know, if the parent has to work, usually that is the reason for why kids have to be in a certain program, but helping that kid to understand, like, you know, I have to work and this is how things are for now. It's not going to be like the way forever. And can we do this to work together to make it work?
Also on the relationship front, being able to ask a kid, what would they rather be doing? If they did, what did they want to do? And every now and then you'll just get a kid say, I just want to be home. I haven't been home all day. I just want to be home, or something like that. And then you can be right there with the compassion for that. You can be right there leaning into whatever it is going on for that kid. Sometimes they want to get away from something. Sometimes they want to get to something.
Thank you. Thank you, Christina. I have 2 more questions in the question and answer box. Susan, are you interested in coming on mic and asking your own question? Susan, I'm going to allow you to talk. Susan doesn't have an unmute button. Okay. So Susan's question is, what are you noticing about changes in group behavior post-pandemic? For example, hard time focusing, younger behaviors. How can we balance the need to address social emotional learning when also being urged to work on learning recovery?
Okay, Ren, I think, can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
A
Great.
little unmute thing just popped up.
Great.
So I'm working with second graders, and I have been struck with their their attention span, their challenges in focusing seem more like first grade or younger. And knowing that, you know, I need to have the time to go back and get some of those shift, first of all, what I'm expecting for attention span, but also helping them learn how to do some of those basic things like one at a time for talking in a group and that sort of thing. And I finding that kids are getting frustrated easily with each other. And yet at the same time, there's a pressure. I'm in a school setting and there's a pressure to work on learning recovery. And so just would love to hear from all or any of the panelists just how to think about, I just need a framework for myself for how to balance those competing, what I'm feeling are competing demands right now.
You know, I'd like to make a comment that I have heard from more second grade teachers in the last year than any other grade. And I've had schools reach out about second grade classes more than any other grade. And I've had parents talk about this age more than mostly any other age in terms of the impact of the pandemic. And I'll tell you, my theory is that I think people may not be so aware of how much socialization kids get in kindergarten to be school kids, and then in first grade to be bona fide school kids that set them up for second grade, not just academically, but socially and emotionally. And not just the children, but the parents. What parents get from kindergarten teachers and first grade teachers as they've interacted with when parents interact with teachers about what expectations are. And so they set that up at home so that their kids are set up to do well in school. And because kids there hasn't been that in the same way, parents haven't been allowed on campus when kids are on campus. There's been so much Zoom. There's been a setback in that. And it's really felt in particular for some reason in second grade. So I just want to say you're not alone. There are a lot of people working with this age group. Sorry.
Thanks. I really appreciate that perspective, Sheri. That helps.
I was going to say the same thing. COVID did a number on second graders because it's so important. They missed all of those building blocks to socialization and peer relationships. And so the same second grade is our grade level in day school and after school. And one of the things that we've done to sort of combat that and teach them how to work together. And I hear you, there's that rush to make up that learning loss, and we're so focused on academics. One of the ways that we found to meld those two things together is lots of collaborative learning opportunities. And so rolling the lesson out and really focusing on less direct instruction and more small group, and really opportunities for them to work together and talk through ideas and build things together. It sort of builds that camaraderie between them, and it teaches them those fundamental skills that they miss.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much for the question.
And thank all of you. Thanks. That was very helpful.
We also have another question, which from an anonymous attendee for Sheri. Any suggestions on how to approach a student using his or her disability as an excuse for their actions? For example, getting out of seat to wander around, or when going to the restroom, goes to the class next door and flipping the middle finger or yelling profanity and saying that they can't help it because they have ADD or sensory issues.
Wow, what an interesting thing. This is part of the problem we have with defining people. That child may have a diagnosis, and it may be important to know that diagnosis because that explains why they may need to take medication or why they may need to get an accommodation. So that sense of identity, I need to understand that I learn differently, that I respond differently, that I have, these are the special challenges that I have. And that all of that information is information to so that we know how to accommodate a child, not so we contour to a child. So the important thing is, what is an accommodation is leveling the playing field so everybody can play. Contouring is saying, oh, you don't have to play. It's hard for you, so you don't have to play. We don't help kids when we contour. We don't help them be in the world. So it needs to be clear that you're special and unique in some ways. Some things are harder for you. And some things are more challenging, and some things don't occur to you. And you're just like everybody else. We don't disturb other classes. We don't do something rude. Here is something you can do. Here are ways we can help you. How to accommodate this kid without contouring. And lots of times my experience with teachers and after school staff is sometimes a kid or a parent will define themselves, and then somehow the staff person follows that definition. You're the leader, not the follower. You get to say, even when kids have challenges, this is how it works here. This is what we do. And also, I want to say that parents and kids will often come to us with the solution. I have this, or this happened, so I want that. Or you have to do this for my kid. And you can say, help me understand what the need is. And then we can work together on a solution. So this kid may have ants in their pants. They may have to wander around. They may have to be reminded more often, but they don't get to propose the solution for their ADHD. You get to take leadership in that. Is that helpful?
We'll see if anonymous attendee would like to respond. Let us know if that's helpful. Are you seeing young people with the diagnosis of ADHD, Ludecea or Sheba? And what are some interventions that you use?
I have not. I can't say that there's anything in particular in my mind that sticks out. That doesn't mean that those students don't exist. I think that it goes back to those building genuine relationships and the staff really helping them navigate within the settings that they are in.
Yeah.
What's extraordinary here is the kid using a diagnosis as leverage.
Right.
And to be able to say, you know, that helps us know where you need support. It doesn't help us know what rules to give up.
Yeah, I haven't had a lot of kids with the diagnosis, mostly anxiety and depression, as we've discussed as a result of COVID. But usually, even with those diagnoses, it's ADHD can be like combined or a secondary diagnosis for what they're dealing with. Yeah.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from our attendees? Sheri, you had mentioned that you had some questions that had been gathered by Sam.
Yeah, I'm thinking of one here is how can we help students that are just starting school, like the little ones that aren't experienced in self-soothing and attend after school to adjust to long days in school.
Mm-hmm.
And they're having trouble being separated from parents. This would happen a lot in the fall, but also after the winter break, you see it again. And that sometimes because they can't self-soothe, there's outbursts and they're used to being soothed by parents, and they reject being in the program. That's sort of like the 5th grader that came up. Responding to that, I think the thing that all of us panelists are saying is relationship. Like, you really, really want to lead with empathy, join them, move over to where they are. I know this is hard for you. And ask them what they do at home when they're feeling sad and what happens, and then help them learn how they can do that for themselves and get more independent about that. And when you ask them to join an activity, using language like, until your mom comes, do you want to do this? So that they can hold that not yet, but it's going to happen, feeling like there's room for both. You can miss your mommy and be here. You're going to go home and right now you're here. You can even talk to them about the people you miss, so that they know that they're just like everybody else. We all miss people sometimes, and we all have to be somewhere that's hard to be in sometimes. Maybe you guys have ideas too from the programs.
ISANA as an organization has created calming corners in each classroom. And so they're created sort of in collaboration between the different instructors that utilize that classroom. And so that has worked for us because they're so like calm and cuddly and soothing. Even when I go into classrooms, sometimes for observations, I go and sit crisscross applesauce in the soothing corner, just because they're so peaceful. And so because our students are so, they know that they're there, they know what they're for, it's not unusual to see a student who's crying or having a rough time transitioning, come in class, drop their stuff at their desk and go right over into that area until they feel comfortable transitioning out. And then it's also not uncommon, especially with our little babies, to walk into class and see the program leader teaching or doing an activity and holding someone's hand or a student wrapped around their leg and them sort of like rubbing them on the back until they're able to transition back.
You know, everybody has said over and over again that building relationships are really critical. I'm curious to know how are you building relationships, or how are you seeing that after school workers are building relationships? What are they actually doing in program to build relationships? And do you spend a portion of the beginning of the day or the beginning of the program with intentional relationship building activities?
I can start with that. One thing that I have noticed is really helpful is the simple question of, how are you doing today? What did you do for, over the weekend? Questions that are being asked about who they are as an individual, and that willingness to listen to what they're saying and engage with them on that level to show that you can see them as an individual. They're not just, a number as a part of the program, a name that you just check off. They come in and then they leave. They just come in and follow directions, do what they're asked to do, and then leave. You're actually making that intentional act of just getting to know them as an individual and who they are is really, really powerful.
I agree. I think that message right there of, I see you, just you in this moment, is so powerful. I mean, one of the benefits we all know about after school programs is the socialization, but so is having another adult see you.
I was gonna say the same. There's an expectation ISANA wide for us that starts in the morning, that by the time you get in your seat in the classroom, By 8:10, you've been greeted by 3 adults on campus and you've been greeted by name. And so we carry that over into after school. And so within that first 15 minutes between 2:45 and 3, you have made a one-on-one connection with every single student in your class. And so I tell them, if it seems overwhelming, it doesn't have to be. It can literally be you taking roll and stopping at each student. Hey, how was your day? Did you see that game last night? Something so simple. I love your shoes, anything. I'm like, it can be really fast, but you need to touch each student one-on-one and make that connection. And then with us, we do social enrichment is embedded into every single day. And so those social enrichment blocks for us, that 50 minutes is a chance for them to collaborate and build relationships amongst each other too.
And it's a two-way street, not just seeing them, but having them know you, saying something personal about yourself, aligning yourself with them. Oh yeah, I've been to that place, or oh yeah, I have a brother too, or whatever it is.
ASAP Scrabble writes in chat that one thing that's worked surprisingly well with students that they have had is having them also see me as a person, just what you're saying, Sheri. Sharing moments from my weekend, pictures of my dog during downtime, those kinds of things. Thank you, ASAP Scrabble.
I'd also like to make an observation. You know, when Sheba, you talk about your program, there are rules and protocols, and there's a lot of mission and design that somebody could say, well, wait, this is formulaic. How are you going to have a relationship with kids if you're following a program? This is where the what and the how come together, because just following that alone, not every person makes connections with kids doing that. If the place you're coming from is, oh, I have to say my hello this morning, that isn't going to work. It's how, it's that you bring from head to toe, you bring the thoughtfulness and the rule following, but you also bring the heart and you bring your instincts to it, so that the how brings that to life. But if you're in a program that is all about the how, and there is zero structure and zero guidelines and zero mission that you're all working on together, that puts a lot on you. And so having programs, having people be collaborative about coming together and doing the kinds of things Sheba's program does, I think is really important.
Thank you for pointing that out, because there is the framework. Like, these are my non-negotiables. Like, this is what I expect from this program, but how you do it is up to you. And so I tell them it's different for everyone. My go-to is I'm passing students in the hall. You good? Yeah. And sometimes it's just a yeah. Sometimes it's a let's stop and let's talk. She opened that door for me. So what feels comfortable to you? Because if not, the kids know, they can see that it's not real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
B. Rodriguez in chat says, when I get to class, first grade, I ask students how their day is going. How are they feeling? I follow about something they shared the day before. If I see them sad, blue, or upset, I ask, what's going on?
I like that. I love the follow-up from the day before, because it's that genuine interest. Like, I'm really like, I heard you, I see you. Where are we now with it? I like that a lot.
That's a good tip for partners too.
Oh, yeah.
And families, you know, just in general.
Yeah. All right, I'll pause to see if there are any more questions or comments from those of you out in webinar land, or any final comments from our esteemed guests on challenging behavior.
I'll go. I would say one of the things I tell my staff all the time is, are you allowing them grace? Because we know as adults, we've had so many lived experiences, and sometimes we say things and sometimes we do things in a moment that in the next moment you're like, it went too far. Like, that's not okay. And you allow yourself grace. Some of us do. And so that's my biggest thing for my team, is to always allow students grace and always allow them to reset the next day. When they come back into that space, they need to be welcomed the same way that you would have welcomed them on the first day of school, with open arms and energy and love and expectation. Just allow them grace, allow them to grow and learn from their mistakes.
Beautiful, thank you.
I want to add something what I said before about when we work with kids, we have tremendous influence. We also have limitations. And a lot of people ask a lot about in this digital era about all the cyber stuff that goes on and how kids can be mean to each other, get into stuff they shouldn't get into, and all of the stuff that goes online that we can't really control. Because they're going to go there. I mean, I always tell parents that for centuries, parents have said when kids are about to go out the door, where you're going, who you're going to be with, when you're going to be back, and they should be doing the same when kids go online. Where you going, who you're going to be with, this is when you need to be back. But also, I just want to say that in the ways that you use yourself and have relationships with kids and foster their relationships with each other, you're setting a foundation for values, for human values, social values, moral values that will carry over. And you can even use the language that when you talk to somebody, whether it's in person or online, this is the influence it has. This is the impact it has. Think about your intentions, all of these, so that they get you inside them when they go to those places that you're not with them.
Thank you so much. We want to really thank Sheri, Sheba, and Ludecea for spending time with us today and sharing their wisdom around challenging behaviors. I want to just, before we head off, I just want to remind people that Sheri has a book called Raising Kids, Your Essential Guide to Everyday Parenting. We'll send you out this link after this webinar. And also want to invite you to our next webinar, which is happening on January 23rd, Promoting Kindness in After School with Stu Semigrin, who runs the Educare Foundation. His staff will also be joining to talk about promoting kindness in the after school. Thank you again. We wish all of us grace as we go out and deal with our own challenging behavior and the challenging behavior of young people we may meet, holding kindness in our heart. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ladies, it was a pleasure.